The way I would describe our session is social media and how it's monetized. And I think that breaks into a couple of main areas, ads and commerce. And at a high level, I think it's a really fascinating topic. On some levels, it is so big, it's literally taken the world by storm. Last month, 37% of adults in the U.S. visited a social media site, as in a social network. 70% of teens did. I was speaking at a class, at a high school, a college freshman class at Drexel down in Philadelphia, and I'm sorry to say, Patrick, I was showing my LinkedIn profile, and I said, how many people know what LinkedIn is? And it was like maybe barely a hand went up. I said, how many people are on Facebook? And every hand rocketed up. And I said, how many of you were on Facebook today? And every hand stayed up. I mean, it's completely dominant there. And we're seeing things like, billion-dollar media spends on social network properties. One site, for example, MySpace, in February had 65 million visitors and 1 billion visits. So there's a lot happening good and interesting on the big side, but on the same level, if you narrow down and say how much advertising has happened on widgets, for example, I've heard estimates that it's as low as $40 or $50 million spent specifically on widgets. If you look at what's happening in monetization of a lot of that inventory, you'll find they're measuring CPMs in nickels and dimes and quarters, and click-through rates in basis points, way below 0.1% in some cases. So there's a lot of different things happening in this whole world. And then you see things like today, Bebo gets acquired for $850 million by AOL, which is a mind-boggling dollar amount for a second-tier site that not a lot of people here know a lot about, and they got bought for more than MySpace got bought for a few years ago. So there's a whole lot happening in this world, and I think we've got a great panel to help us talk about it and figure some of this out. And I'm going to start off by asking each of the panelists to introduce themselves, and I'm going to also introduce myself. I'm Chris Freilich, and I'm a partner with First Round Capital. We're an early-stage venture capital firm with offices in Philadelphia, San Francisco, and also here in New York. I personally have been in the technology world for about 24 years, starting at the dawn of the PC industry, and most recently for the last 2 years in the venture capital world. Before that, I was VP of Business Development at Delicious, the social bookmarking and tagging site, kind of the poster child of Web 2.0 back in that 05 timeframe. And then prior to that, I was an early employee at Half.com, which was a used books, music, and movies marketplace, person to person, got acquired by eBay in 2000. I spent 6 years at eBay in commerce and ad business development. So that's a little history about myself and kind of teeing up some of the topics we'll talk about today. So I'd like to ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, tell about themselves personally, what a little bit of high level about what their company does, and if you'd like, I'd love to hear each of your favorite or what you find to be an interesting social network or user-generated media site that maybe you personally use or your kids or something you find interesting. So why don't we start here, Jim?
Hi, everybody. My name is Jim Bernard. I'm the general manager of MarketWatch.com, which is now part of the News Corp enterprise. And I've been with MarketWatch since it wasn't MarketWatch. I actually joined MarketWatch as Big Charts, which was an early acquisition that MarketWatch made back when the .com era was roaring in 1999. So I've been working at MarketWatch in a variety of sales, product, and business development positions, the current one being the owner of the site MarketWatch.com. MarketWatch fits, just briefly, MarketWatch fits into the Wall Street Journal digital network. So my sister sites are WSJ.com, Barron's Online, and All Things D, the Mossberg site. My guilty little secret is that I love Doppler, which is this Where Are You Traveling social network. I just joined it. I'm also on Twitter and a handful of other ones, but Doppler is my new one. I love it, and if I could just give it a pitch, one thing I love about it is that it syncs with my calendar at home and helps alleviate stress in my marriage. So any social network that's helping, and she doesn't even know it. It's just I put the trips in there, and they show up, and she's like, "Oh, you're traveling again." So so that's about me.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Steve?
Yeah, I'm Steve Greenberg. I'm the chairman of NABR, and my background actually is in the music business. I've done that for quite a while, most recently as president of Columbia Records. When I left Columbia, I really decided that the social network space was where the music business needed to head, and so decided to get very involved in a company called NABR, which creates viral video widgets for use by premium content owners. And there's so many viral video widgets out there, but not many have distribution. And so the real problem that NABR has solved is the problem of distribution, how to get the eyeballs. NABR widgets are distributed on the on a network of MySpace coding sites. MySpace coding sites are the places that live around MySpace and Facebook and Bebo, where users go to get stuff with which to decorate their MySpace page. They go there for layouts and backgrounds and wallpaper and glitter graphics and widgets of all sorts. And NABR has done exclusive deals with the top coding sites to have the NABR widget in autoplay on the front page of all of these sites. So the NABR network actually reaches currently approximately 36 million monthly uniques. And so it provides tremendous velocity for premium content owners, mostly at the moment music companies, film companies, and TV networks for everything from webisodes to film trailers to music videos. And as far as a interesting, social network phenomenon that I've sort of been fascinated by, I'm going to echo the shout out to Twitter. This week is a big week in the music industry because it's the South by Southwest conference down in Austin, and there's literally thousands of people from the music business in one place. And I'm not there yet. I'm going after this, but I'm on Twitter, and I'm absolutely blown away by the number of Twitter messages that are going back and forth from people just sort of telling them where they should be right now because something good is happening, or where they shouldn't be right now because there's a long line. And it's really incredible sort of, real-time management of large crowds spread out across an entire city. And I would say that Twitter at the moment is directing traffic at that event, and it's a really interesting phenomenon.
I'm Ben Ezrick, responsible for emerging media at Ogilvy Interactive. Clients include Allstate, Yahoo, Six Flags, Dove, and the list goes on. Basically, what my responsibility is to explore emerging media, so whether that be interactive TV, video on demand, social media, mobile, or video games, and figure out new companies and new product offerings that could potentially help our clients' business. So it's important that not only that these areas reach the target demographic that an advertiser is looking to speak to, but that they also kind of move business objectives forward. One interesting site that I've come across recently is called Movie Wii. I don't know if anyone has a Nintendo Wii at home, but right now it's optimized to view YouTube videos, so you can actually view them on your TV. And right now you can't view anything else other than YouTube on the Wii. So what Movie Wii has done is optimize all the videos around the web so that you can watch them on the Wii. So if you have that console at home, I suggest checking out the site.
I'll throw in one more plug related. We were investors in a company called StumbleUpon, and they created a way to stumble videos on your Wii the same kind of way. See the things that people had thumbed up across the internet. So
no kidding.
Very cool.
I'll have to check that out.
So hi, my name is Marcian Jenks. I'm the CEO of a company called Voxent. We distribute premium content across the web to mid and long tail publishers. We do that in a way that protects the content producer's copyright. I am very bullish in terms of monetization of premium content, much less bullish around UGC stuff, so this will be an interesting panel. Although my prior job, I managed all of the community properties at AOL, AIM, ICQ. I was Senior Vice President of Community Messaging and Voice. And the site that I was going to tout was StumbleUpon because I'm a big fan of it. So.
Hi, Rich Bibbins. I'm the Vice President of the Media and Entertainment Practice at Virtusa. We're an IT services company, and we have among our customers folks like Thomson, their scientific and healthcare, British Telecom, National Geographic, a number of smaller entities. A lot of what we do is to help them through the design consultation phase on in what ways to start integrating technologies and business processes like this in a way that's smart for their business. I'd say, especially with the monetization angle, one of the things that was interesting as I was thinking through some of the possible ways that viral, user-generated, monetized technologies are impacting is, of course, watching my kids. And one of the things that's interesting that I had no idea about without preparing for this is that they've taken an online Google Calendar among a group of roughly 100 kids and have started doing the sharing of dates, what they're doing, what things they're interested in, sending the emails. And what's interesting to watch if you go through their emails, which we like to do frequently, is that in reverse, the advertising that is then coming out of their interest in getting tickets to a certain concert is getting them all the same kinds of pitches, which somebody's bound to click on, somebody's bound to go out and purchase that, and while they're in the process, they're sending emails to each other saying, hey, should I get a dozen while I'm getting 2 or 3? And it's amazing to realize that's where the credit card is going, but it's a great viral example in our household anyway.
I'm Patrick Crane. I head up marketing and ad sales for LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a professional network, uses a lot of the same technologies the social networks do, but has a number of differences that maybe we'll explore today. We passed 20 million professionals on the system 2 days ago, growing at about 1 every 2 seconds. And we are very focused now on getting people to get all the value out of the professional network that they've got. And that's really what we're about. We're about enabling you to draw from the relationships you've got to accomplish things. UGM, I'm a publisher. I publish the Santiago Show. That's the name of my son. And I use JumpCut to do that. It's a little-known video site.
Yahoo bought them, right?
Sorry?
Yahoo bought them.
Yahoo
right?
bought them, that's right. And they have some really interesting tools for enabling a really vibrant and extremely courteous video community to interact with each other and riff on each other's work. And it's interesting when you look at the dynamic between a big video site like YouTube versus a little thing like JumpCut from a user dynamic point of view. So I love that. The final thing is not specifically UGC, but it's an insight about kids and technology. My son is 18 months old, and one of his favorite things to do is grab my iPhone and hold it in front of him and flick through pictures of himself. So that's an indication of the next generation.
That's really cool. I'd also admit my most used social network is absolutely LinkedIn, and I jumped in early and I've cultivated it, and we actually, if you go to firstround.com, if a company wants to submit a business plan or meet us, we ask them to come in through LinkedIn by way of a trusted introduction. So we take it very seriously. And from the kids side, there's a lot of talk about kids, and on this completely side note, there's a really great PBS Frontline show called Growing Up Online that is all about the social networks and impacts and what it's like for kids today to literally grow up with their lives and photos and what relationships they're in or not, and cyberbullying and whatnot online. It's fascinating. And the other social networks I enjoy with my 8-year-old are Club Penguin and Webkins and a site called Roblox, which is pretty cool. I want to dive in a little bit around, and I think maybe I want to start with Steve, because you're very close to the world of widgets and distribution. And how are folks measuring? There's a lot of talk about engagement, and how do you define it, and how do you think marketers are defining it? And I'd also like to get Ben's take on this one and anyone else.
Well, I think that obviously there are various levels of engagement for our widgets, for starters, which range from just sort of being exposed to the widget when you go on a page before you have time to shut it off, to actually watching the content that's on the widget, to clicking through to somewhere else from the widget, to finally embedding the widget on your own social page. I think I always look at the audience for our widgets as sort of a twofold audience. There's the audience that we reach on the network, which is a huge audience, right? For any campaign we do, it's measured in the millions. And those are people who we assume are sort of casually interested in what we're doing. And then we have the smaller but more active audience of people who actually have embedded something that we've created on their social network page. Now, if you can identify the people who have actually taken your widget and put it on their page and who are engaging with it regularly, because we encourage our content providers to provide a steady stream of content to feed the widget once the widgets have been embedded, as opposed to it being just a one-shot widget like a YouTube video where you've seen the one thing and then that's it. We really try to have an ongoing relationship with the consumer. All of a sudden you realize that those are far more valuable audience members, right? Because those are audience members who have already voted in favor of the content that you're offering and presumably will continue to become engaged by that content if you can continue to offer compelling content. And for advertisers, that is potentially the more lucrative, although smaller, audience, in the sense that potentially higher CPMs can be charged for an already identified and pre-sorted and self-selected audience than for the broader audience. So I'd say that we have a lot of levels of engagement.
Yeah, and from an advertiser perspective, it really split that into kind of two different areas. The first one being when an advertiser kind of puts their content on a third-party widget, and one where we create our own widget. Right now, we're very focused on creating our own widgets because it allows us to bring the brand's content directly to the consumer so they can download it to their desktop. They can obviously put it in their social networking page. And then we measure engagement. I guess that would be the first step. Number of people who've downloaded onto their desktop and social networking page. Those people are kind of our core customers. Then there's a lot of talk now about banner ads becoming widgets. So you're seeing that a widget is being syndicated through multiple media properties. So we can have paid placements within sites like Facebook, and we'll measure the number of people who then decide to download the widget to their page or just interact with the different features. Maybe there's video that we want them to see, or we'd like them to sign up for a newsletter. So there are various ways that we can measure engagement, and it's really particular to that specific client. Some clients may create a widget in order to gain subscribers to a newsletter or to actually generate sales, and others may just want to have more brand engagement and have people watch videos, outtakes of their commercials, long-form branded entertainment, anything along those lines. And then when we advertise on a third-party widget, we're really looking to drive traffic to the advertiser's webpage or to their content. So that's how we would measure it.
Just for clarification for me, an advertising widget that's just essentially an ad with special powers. An ad that can be embedded somewhere else, or an ad that is it, or am I thinking about it the wrong way?
In a sense, I think it's definitely based on your perspective. I think from an advertiser perspective, we'd like to think of ourselves more as content providers at this point. So we're developing a relationship where it's less speaking at the customer than developing a relationship, providing content, and offering more engaging materials.
Okay.
So.
One of those special powers that I'm aware of a couple of companies that are working on is the ability to understand what they would call a parent-child relationship. So you could track and know who were the first folks that installed and caused the most other people to install, and be able to see them among the sea of millions of people you have to know who really makes the most difference, and in the words of Seth Godin, sneezes your message out to the rest of the audience. So I think that's interesting. Other things I've heard of are people tracking widget views, number of widget installs, time spent is an interesting factor that people look at, and then whatever their measure of interaction and engagement is. But one thing I've wondered and noticed, and wonder if the panel has any thoughts on, is there in the early days of the Facebook frenzy, everybody just invited everybody and started filling up their pages and trying out apps. Do you sense that there's a little fatigue and the novelty is wearing off a bit, or is it evolving? Wondered if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, I know that we're seeing some traffic decline to the social networking sites. I mean, the recent Comscore figures have shown that MySpace has dropped off a little bit, and so has Facebook. So it's really a wait-and-see attitude at this point. We don't know where the social media world is going to evolve and where it's going to head next. There's a lot of frenzy around Second Life, for instance, last year when they were on the cover of Business Week, and that's died down a bit. And it's not to say that Second Life isn't as exciting as it was a year ago. It's just we don't know where it's going to go next. And a lot of people have theories that it is the future of the internet. It represents a 3D version of it. So we're really going to have to wait and see whether it's there's fatigue with the social networking sites and whether it's temporary or long term.
I see. I've seen a little bit of that. LinkedIn doesn't currently enable third-party applications to go on, and when we do, it'll be very different. It'll be very much around professional content, professional productivity stuff. But as a user of the social networks, I've seen those apps, and I've become disappointed with some of my friends that they would do certain things. I now think of them differently. But I think that it's just going to level out a little bit in terms of the social networks who've created this kind of very busy, crazy environment. They'll just tidy it up a little bit. I mean, the great thing about these sites, and including ours, including LinkedIn's, is that you can get a tremendous amount of feedback, both data-oriented as well as just tell us what you think and then, prepare yourself for a tidal wave of ideas. But you can get so much feedback back from these audiences, whether you're the site yourself or you're a brand on that site. And so I think they'll just correct it a little bit. They'll tidy it up. They'll create the ability for a user to say, and they already are doing this, you can say, you know what, I don't want to see that again, so don't show me an update like that anymore. And they'll clean it up. And I think that when they've done that, there's still a very important thing left that they will have as an asset, that we will have as an asset, and that the brand marketer will have as an opportunity, and that is the relationship. So there's still the relationship's still at the core, and that's a very powerful thing.
So let's talk a little bit more about LinkedIn. I know that the company often quoted as saying, we're not Facebook, and we don't want to be Facebook, but there's obviously more and more social type of features from a status. Now I could say, I'm reading this book or I'm at this conference, and there's news feeds of what's happening, more like a Facebook. How should we think about your third-party app implementation and open social, and what kinds of things might we see when you do turn it on?
Yeah, I'll just answer the first thing first if I can about the status thing, because that's fair. I think that's fair. You can call that a Facebook-like feature. I think Facebook did a real nice job of it. We know from the professionals on LinkedIn that they want to be able to communicate more. They want to be able to interact more, and that they'll get more value out. And they've told us that, in no uncertain terms. But you won't say, Chris is eating a cheese sandwich on LinkedIn, because people are just going to think a bit less of you as a professional. You'll probably talk about where you're going, what you're traveling on, where you'd appreciate some advice on. It's a different kind of dynamic. So I maintain that we still don't want to be Facebook. We are 100% professional. On the open social stuff, though, Google's, if you're familiar with open social, it's just a way that Google's created to enable providers of widgets and applications to plug in to all these websites and get in front of those audiences and get distribution. And we're part of that alliance. And when we launch it, though, you're not going to be, hopefully none will leave LinkedIn when I say this, but you won't be able to throw any sheep at each other. There'll be no zombie biting, so I'm sorry to disappoint you if you thought we would. What we're thinking about, and the kind of providers that are coming to us, they're thinking about things like, how do I provide an app that lets a network form a WebEx in seconds, or lets a working group share a document in seconds, or do peer-to-peer video together if they want to do a conference, those kinds of things. There'll be some kind of opportunity to do self-expression through these things. Here's what I'm reading. Here's an important text. But we will not launch 1,000 applications on this thing. We might launch in 2008. We might launch 15. It's just a very, very, very different approach.
So one point is you will be approving and launching all third-party apps on
yes.
LinkedIn. Got it. Jim, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how MarketWatch has started to evolve into a more social site and what's happening there.
About a year ago, we decided that we were going to make social networking, or not social networking, sorry, user-generated comments and content part of our product plan. And in September, we put a team on it, decided to build it in-house. We looked at external vendors and ultimately decided to build it in-house. And in September, we launched comments at the bottom of MarketWatch stories, along with tagging and recommending, all the stuff that the folks at Delicious taught us how to do. So we were we've been absolutely delighted with how it's worked out for us. It provides a tremendous amount of value both to us and to our readers, and we're able to build. I mean, we have not taken that engineering team off of that, so they continue to work on it. We've got a roadmap that goes out for another 9 or 10 months, including groups, which we just launched, and we have a number of other innovations. I'll give you one example, which is kind of intriguing to me. We let people come and pick stock, whether a stock is going to go up or down, and you can choose in 3 or 4 different time frames: tomorrow, a week from now, tomorrow, 3 months, et cetera, 1 month and 3 months. And every time a user does that, we get some data about what they think that stock is going to do, and thousands of users are doing it every day, and they're choosing a huge group of stocks. And some of them are very accurate, some of them are a little less accurate. So I don't know if anybody's familiar with the Hulbert Financial Digest, but Mark Hulbert, who's an expert in creating algorithms around that, is starting to work with that to see if we can create a sentiment indicator that would be able to tell you a specific stock or even the market as a whole as it relates to MarketWatch users. And then we'll build custom editorial around that and possibly visualizations around that. That data is all our data. So the best part is the users are getting something for it because they can see how they match against their peer group, but then we also can turn it back to them, and potentially we can even sell it as a feed to higher end folks who might, hedge funds and other kinds of people who buy some of the other Hulbert data that we create. So this is a tiny piece of it. I mean, really the big headline, if you go to MarketWatch right now, is that almost every story has comments underneath it, and there are hundreds and hundreds of them. And that activity, I think, kind of is brash, and it's kind of what the site is about. It's about people, not about kind of the elite. So we're happy about the way that resonates. Yesterday there was an article by our executive editor, and somebody called him a buffoon, and our editor was just delighted. I mean, that's the rough and tumble MarketWatch. But I think that it's a place where we're going to continue to evolve, and we're really glad that we've decided to make a commitment to it.
Richard, I wanted to know what your clients are thinking about in this new social world, and are there any industries that seem a little more willing to get there first than others?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there are 2 things on that. I think one is there is a bit of a next wave feel to some of what we're going through on this the social networking, which feels a little bit like a last wave that I know some of us went through. And one of the things that seems to be happening is now that there's the acknowledgement that user-generated content and the social networking is real, at the same time that maybe some of the traffic levels are dipping on what I'll call sort of the horizontal sites. There's a lot of focus on some of our customers who already have a brand, already have a kind of community, at saying, how do we retain that 40% user base that's currently going elsewhere to build a community? Let's bring them back in. I think historically that typically was not building solutions, so that may not be the best answer for us. But there's partnerships, private labeling that can now bring the communities into a richer place, so that you originate with a content supplier or originate with somebody who has a media brand, but you may ultimately end up, quote unquote, losing to a vertical, in some cases a vertical slice that may be going over to a LinkedIn or a Facebook, where the person has left the site physically, but you're still retaining the relationship with them. The other one, which is kind of interesting, is more on our European side of the house, which is a lot of our customers there are in the telco or telco-related business, and a lot of the telcos are beginning to realize that they are essentially the point of sale for a lot of transactions that are going on. And the more banner ads, at least in our experience, are now starting to be talked about as more interactive things, perhaps even things that can become now monetization events themselves. The more the telcos are in a great spot to say, boy, if we've got the community of people who frequent that pizza parlor and have reviews to post and want to know instantaneously, is this a good place to get a slice, and all the way up to the point where you may conduct some commerce over that device, this is now a place where the definition of who is a user and what is their community is going to get defined by very flexible attributes, like what location are you in right now, or what kind of preferences do you have. So we've been engaged to sort of look into that to say, okay, who exactly is defining the brand, who's defining the social graphs that go into powering that kind of app, and of course the telcos already bring the who am I and where am I and some of those key attributes.
I'd like to talk a little bit about the monetization and the revenue side of it, in particular rev share. And I was thinking, Marcian, you're in the syndication business, and maybe you could just tell us how it works and what trends you're seeing in monetization and rev share in your business.
Yep. So I'll give you two examples, contrasting examples. I think I recently read that Rever was going out of business or was looking to be bought or something.
They did. They got bought.
Yeah. They had a monetization model around user-generated content. The idea was, submit your content, we will monetize it, and rev share back to you. The one problem is that it was really hard to monetize the user-generated content because, as most advertisers will tell you, there is not enough opportunities to advertise against premium content, and there's a whole bunch of junk out there. Fair?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Get that, yeah.
There are other examples of that, and I'll actually take Video Egg as another example. I love the company Video Egg. Was a big fan of it for a very long time. They did a distributed user-generated content model where they basically created a set of tools, said if you want community for your site, come and grab it, put it up, and your whole community can participate. And they did incredibly well. Difficulty, again, is they had trouble monetizing it. And the good news for them is they built a very nice sales force that eventually, now this is entirely my interpretation, eventually they got tired of trying to monetize the stuff they couldn't monetize, and so they started trying to monetize the stuff that they could. And they started selling ads against premium content. They've become a very effective premium video ad network, which is not at all kind of where they started to begin with. So I guess as I think about kind of rev share and how you think about that, the first thing you need is a model that you can monetize. You need revenue before you can rev share. And a big challenge for everybody that's trying to stand up kind of all of these kind of revenue share based businesses is that they don't often solve for that first piece of it. If you do solve for that first piece of it, then I think the challenge then becomes, how do you compensate all the players in the chain, and is there enough revenue to make it worthwhile for everybody? And that's tough, right? You have content providers that actually spend a lot of time making professionally produced and quality content to build an audience. And there's whole giant media companies that build big businesses around it. And they are looking for ways to get compensated. And so far, the internet has shown that in many cases, people are trying to push them to free, which is hard, right? So those guys have to be compensated. You then have, in a distributed model, like the one that we do, a whole bunch of long-tail and mid-tail publishers who are aggregating audiences, and they want to get compensated. And then there's folks like us who facilitate the connection of those two through technology, and we obviously want to get compensated as well. So I'd say the two challenges as you think about that is, first, are you creating things that you can actually monetize so that the revenue comes into place? And then second is there enough revenue that comes into place that you can spread it across all the players that are involved in order to make it worthwhile for their businesses? And I believe the answer to the first is yes, you can, as long as the experiences you're trying to monetize are worthwhile. And the answer to the second is, again, yes, you can, but the margins are very thin. So I think there's a big race for distribution, right? If you can build a big enough audience, then you can live with a small margin times a very big number. And that's really the play in all of these things.
The one thing I'd just ask us to remember, though, is that it would be a shame if we come away from this thinking that all user-generated media and social media sites necessarily thin margins and CPMs. You mentioned CPMs in the pennies and those kinds of things. And it does vary. The LinkedIn model is different. It only has 25% of its revenues coming from advertising. It's great CPMs because it's a senior audience like you guys. But then the company makes money other ways, and the margins are very high. We have a decent slice of our base paying between $20 to $200 a month for the premium version of LinkedIn. So when we think about partners in our UGM world, they could be compensated very handsomely for things like if they come in, if they have a great application, if it pulls lots of great professionals in, and they sign up for the premium version of the site, there's a lot of margin to share. So, I would hate it if we came away thinking that there isn't a lot of money to be made in this area, because there is.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And I guess one thing I would say is that if there's one guy here on this panel who is thrilled about the Bebo acquisition, it should be you.
Well, I'm excited too. We've got a number of companies that play in this world. One of them's interesting. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it. It's called MyYearbook.com. It's the largest teen social network in the U.S. It had more visitors in the U.S. than Bebo did last month, and more than High Five, and more than Tagged, and more than LinkedIn, and no one's heard about it. So maybe that'll bode well for them. But we also have good exposure to a lot of companies and how they're monetizing it. We're investors in VideoEgg, as you mentioned. We're in RockU. We're in Gigya. These are a lot of the folks that are playing in this widget economy, and it's not all distributed evenly. I think I heard it from a gentleman earlier today that he said he heard the overall average for CPMs in the kind of widget social media world is between 30 and 50 cent CPMs. I happen to know our own portfolio companies and Real Deals where there's people doing $10 CPMs and $15 CPMs. They tend to not sell out. It's for a portion of your inventory. That's the big caveat that not a lot of people always hear. Then I know that there's a number of companies out there that will buy out all your inventory at 15 cents, on the low end. So I think you see a lot in between there. One of the things I find fascinating is how the platforms themselves think about rev share and how that's incented innovation on their platform. So Facebook was really the first that came out and said, put an app on our site, we don't want anything. You get 100% rev share, and it's off to the races. MySpace apparently today just announced their intentions, and before you didn't know what they would do. You'd start building your business on MySpace, and they might buy you or they might sue you. You really didn't know what would happen. It was a little dangerous place to be, and we joked it was almost an IQ test for one of our startup companies. Should you build your business on MySpace or Facebook? It was go to Facebook. But now they apparently are putting out a 10 to 20% levy or a tax or a fee, which I think is a good thing. And then also real interesting is this week, I don't know if we can talk about Apple a little bit later, but their pricing model for apps on the iPhone is they'll take 30% if it's a paid model for the transaction processing, and they'll give it away free for you if it's a free item. So I'm just wondering what are you all seeing in terms of rev share splits, or are there any trends? Steve, you might have something.
The MySpace development is very positive, obviously, because prior to that, it was very difficult to get commitments for advertising on the embedded widgets because, as you say, people really didn't know what MySpace's reaction would be, and that would, obviously drive down demand for that inventory. Now that question has seemingly been settled, I think that there's really room for to really create a pretty rich revenue share where I think everybody in the chain is going to be able to be quite satisfied because, as I mentioned before, you have this far more desirable, smaller audience who've already stated their preferences, and you can reach them with a pretty high CPM, and I think easily make the content owners and the distributor and obviously MySpace quite happy with that, and so I think that's probably going to open up this space quite a bit, and I think you're going to see a lot more advertising sponsored widgets appear with the goal of becoming widgets that migrate to people's MySpace pages. I think a gold rush could in fact ensue.
We'll also open up to questions if anybody has some in a few minutes. So tee them up and raise your hand if you have any. let's talk a little bit about search, because that's an entry point for a lot of people into their internet experience. What trends is anyone on the panel seeing around either verticalized search or even some more user-generated or user-augmented type of search?
Yeah, so I can talk about that. I mean, earlier when you'd mentioned Stumbled Upon, and I briefly had put a nod to it. What I like about Stumble Upon is that you can create this social filter on the web, and there is something very valuable about knowing what kinds of things the people that you care about, whatever defines that, so the people that you care about are interested in. It certainly works in professional networks, right? So I get a lot of, can you recommend this person, or can you find these types of people as a way to tap into your trusted network? And I think that's an incredibly powerful concept. But my sense is that in all those things, you have to figure out a way to kind of channel the network so that you can make it scalable. The example that you gave for what MarketWatch did is great, right? Because you actually care what everybody thinks about, and everybody gives you a collective feedback on what stocks are going to do, but you do it in a way that kind of channels the information in some sort of useful manner, as opposed to having a whole bunch of people say a bunch of different things, and then it's difficult for somebody to sort through it. So there's value that you can add, and you can filter the kind of community or the social network in such a way that you can aggregate incredibly powerful information. There's a company up in Boston called Sermo, which is a community of physicians, and they have created this closed community. A lot of information is created in the interaction between the various doctors that ultimately has a whole lot of value to pharmaceutical companies, to the doctors themselves, to potential investors. And it's, again, the same type of idea. Can you take a social network or a network of people whose opinion you care about and extract from them some sort of a filter or some type of information that makes that's valuable to you?
Yeah, the Wall Street Journal just did a partnership with Lumia, where it's a built-in Facebook app that'll allow you to see what your network is reading on the journal. And at MarketWatch, we intend to kind of move down that direction, extending groups and other kinds of ways to say, these are the people that you care about. The other thing, as it relates to search, is that because we own it all, we're gearing it up for SEO. We're just trying to figure out the best way to surface it so that you don't end up with the wacky, crazy Ron Paul people. No offense to any Ron Paul people here, but they leave very extensive comments, which you may not want to be associated with your, kind of MarketWatch brand at Google. But inside of the MarketWatch universe, by using that affinity network, you can start to say, hey, I noticed that you're on these kinds of chains. Here's what these people are doing. Here's some feedback about what they're writing and thinking about.
The key word there, one of the key words you said a lot, but one of them was affinity. And part of I think your observations are great, Martian. I mean, these sort of vertical search plays, I think they have to have that affinity, either implied because you're all interested in a certain stock price, or actual, meaning you have a network that you've set up whose opinion you want. So I was I'm making a little list here, and I think Delicious. Who uses Delicious in this room? Can I just have a quick show of hands? So yeah, I mean, it's not a broadly used tool, but if you take the effort to maybe it's an investment of an hour over a month to build a network of people whose opinion you respect, that search experience is really powerful. I was doing Googles and Yahoo searches for a pair of good headphones for my iPod, and I just got the regular stuff, the regular offers, and nothing really good. So I thought, well, I'll try Delicious, and I'm connected to a whole bunch of wealthy geeks, and so I found out there's a $300 Shure set of headphones that by far the best choice. So in that case, that wasn't just an affinity; that was a set of actual relationships whose opinions I really respect. And then you've got other players like for example, Trip Planner. You use Trip Planner where you can. It's kind of cool. You can get. It doesn't matter what the hotel says about themselves.
You mean TripAdvisor?
Sorry, TripAdvisor.
Yep.
I always get confused on that. But there, how much affinity is there actually there? It's cool that you can look at a hotel and not hear the marketing collateral that the hotel wants you to read, and actually hear about real people's stories. But who are those people, and how do they relate to you? Is there enough affinity there? There certainly isn't a relationship. Is there enough affinity there for that rating to actually apply to you? So that my point of view is get closer to affinity or actual relationship to shape your search, to shape your content discovery challenge that you've got in your head.
Any questions in the audience yet? I'll keep going. Oh, Duke, sir.
Jim, are your comments going to be filtered or edited before they're put up on the site?
Yeah, they're filtered for obscenity and the normal stuff. It's a computer filter, but we don't filter them editorially. There's no person that reads them, and since we started, we've had to pull down, since September on hundreds of thousands of comments or 100,000 comments. I don't know. It wouldn't be a lot. It's dozens or a few hundred. It's not very many. But that's also a critical part of our brand. So my colleague who runs WSJ.com simply couldn't do that. You couldn't have the kind of stuff that's underneath the MarketWatch story be underneath the WSJ story. They're completely different kinds of value propositions to the reader. 80% of MarketWatch readers come every day, and most of them come multiple times a day. They want to know what's going on in the markets. So, they're kind of they don't mind that there's people underneath that saying gold went this way and here's what I suggest. So we do let it go a little loose. Calling the editor a bonehead is not the kind of thing you'd be able to do at a lot of branded publications.
Well, isn't the same problem going to arise we have with TripAdvisor? You don't know if the competition is writing the review or the hotel itself is writing it to pump up their.
Well, all the users are around. You can block users, and you can kind of see, so you can say I don't want to see anything more by Armchair Economist, and they go away. And so you can go down that route if you want to. And it looks to me, we've seen. It's funny. We launched in September. 5 months after we launched, we saw an amazing spike. Starting in January, everything has doubled and tripled. 2.5 times as many people commenting. 3 times as many stories getting comments. And so it's not just a small group of crazy people. It's a broadening way that people are now recognizing as part of the fabric of the site. So from that standpoint, I figure the more people we can get in the room, the less that the conversations will self-police themselves. So far, that's worked out pretty well.
It's interesting. There's a company in our portfolio called Bazaar Voice, BAZAAR, that handles ratings and reviews for product and e-commerce companies, and that's all they do is they monitor and customize all of the product ratings across IBM, HP, Dell, dozens of others who pay them for this service, and they have a human being read every comment before it goes live because those brands are concerned about that. But they don't block negative ratings at all. Fascinatingly, unintuitively, negative ratings still lift product sales. Negative ratings, negative reviews and ratings actually turn into lower returns because people are hearing the good and bad about this thing and then deciding is it right for them. And this is completely and totally measurable by the e-commerce sites that use them, and they see dramatic lifts in their site whenever they add ratings and reviews, and it's a measurable impact for them. So it's a corollary to what you just described.
And one of the other interesting things, especially where we work with some of the premium information providers, is one of the challenges for them to be able to keep their CPMs as high as possible was to collect as much information so that the targeting was there and they could demonstrate that there was some value for the banners. The interesting thing that's happened as we've started to launch, particularly some of the more user-generated portions of the sites, is that there is more of a willingness for somebody to give more information about their profession when they know that they are going to get higher value. So getting the relevancy from a doctor, for example, who you know is an oncologist, so if they rate a particular side effect of a medication, for example, knowing that person is in your specialty has a lot of value. So you're willing to do the quid pro quo, where previously you wouldn't want it to go to an advertiser. Now you're feeling more like part of a community, and we're finding that the registration threshold for what information you can get people to fill out is getting lower, so people will actually provide more information because they believe they will get something back out of the community for it.
That's great, Chris. Was there another question over here?
Yeah, that's a question for Patrick.
Yeah.
Are you planning to add services related to business people, for example, hotels or entertainment, for people who don't like to be on Facebook? Like, Facebook is too noisy, but you still want to have something that still you have the network, but kind of covers your personality across workplace.
So it's a question about recommendations that a person would.
Across segments like entertainment, hotels.
The answer to that question is yes. But I think you can still stay professional and you can stay focused on the stuff that professionals do. But I'm the first to admit that I think over the past LinkedIn has been a little dry. There hasn't been as much value that you can get out on a daily basis, and I think that's changing now, and the numbers say that's changing. But why not? Just the other day, I published a status message that said I'm traveling to Dubai. And I just put it out there just to see what would happen, because I'm going to Dubai next month. I've never been before. And then what came back from 11 different members of my first-degree network was, oh, if you're going to Dubai, make sure you check out this place. This is a great hotel to stay at. So that's just a very, very early example of what you're suggesting, which is that one professional can help another out if they're going to a city that they've never maybe operated in before. And there's all kinds of commerce opportunities for the brands themselves. So, for example, if let's say a hotel has earned that relationship with earned a great relationship with someone who stayed at that hotel, they can be a brand advocate and they can drive sales through recommendations. So yeah, I think it's a great question, and it's what we want to do.
Question in the back with the tie. Yep.
A question for Benjamin. We've heard that CPMs in the space for advertising obviously range from pennies to higher CPMs. How does the space need to evolve, this is a general question, to get some of your sort of premium advertising clients more comfortable with pouring more money into social?
Well, I think a lot of things have already happened that have made clients more comfortable. When you look at how MySpace has built out movies and TV sections that aren't necessarily associated with the profile pages, advertisers are more willing to associate themselves with that content and pay a higher price. Sites like LinkedIn, for instance, are drawing in advertisers that wouldn't necessarily advertise on social networking sites to begin with, and you're talking about more B2B clients like IBM or Cisco. So there are different things that are going on that are driving more premium advertisers and raising the CPMs. Obviously, there's the targeting, which helps as well, which is demographic targeting, behavioral, which makes the users more likely to click on the ads because they're more relevant to them. So there are really a host of things that you can do, from contextual to behavioral targeting and demographic targeting.
Had a question there? You. The question was about what role mobile carriers play, and I was going to ask a related question as well, which was, I guess, how many in the room have an iPhone here? Not a lot. I'm surprised. I don't know if you all saw that Steve Jobs and Apple announced their software development kit for rolling out applications and widgets and such onto the iPhone, and in the last 4 days, 100,000 developers have downloaded that kit, and it should be really exciting what happens there. But I'd love to hear what you all are doing and planning for yourselves and your partners in the world of mobile.
My team is one of those 100,000. They downloaded it. But we're really irritated about the carriers and about Apple because from our perspective, it's frustrating because it creates like many different types of code to support. In fact, we're just now kind of turning away from all the carrier mobile sites that we've built up over the years, and there are several of them, many of them, and we've made a very simple MarketWatch mobile. MarketWatch users want to know what's going on.
It's a browser-based tool?
It's not, well, I don't know what it's based on. That's a good question, but it's what you get if you look at MarketWatch on your BlackBerry.
Okay.
and it's not specific to a carrier. And it's very basic. It's just telling you what's going on in the market right now, and it's allowing you to look up stocks and follow a quick portfolio. So we love Apple because we want to do more innovation, and we think it's cool, but we're worried that Apple's going to change the aspect ratio of the iPhone or something, and then all of a sudden we're going to be back, having to redevelop it. And to some degree, if they can just figure out, and they already have, how to make our site look good on their web, on their devices, then we can just use the site, which is already achieving that. So from our perspective, it's frustrating. The split is real frustrating.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought up mobile because I think it's incredibly relevant to the topic, which is social networks. I'm not that impressed with what the carriers are doing specifically. I mean, it's really like the old days of the internet. It's AOL, it's the walled garden. Unfortunately, I don't think they've had a lot of the benefits that AOL had in the beginning, which was that it really was the way most users were accessing the internet on their computers. Where in the case with mobile, we're seeing that users are migrating much more quickly to the off-deck inventory. So that means when you're not, surfing directly on the carrier's webpage. And I think that area is going to explode. You're already seeing social networks are incredibly important for mobile. It's obviously a great way to connect with users, which is what with your friends and family and colleagues, which is what social networking is all about. And so you're seeing sites pop up that are specific to mobile, like Xanel. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of that, but it's already got millions of unique users. And I don't know how the carriers are really going to play in that field. I think at the moment they're really looking to build out their own, ad platforms. And, while they can have some benefit to advertisers, I don't think that's where the future of the mobile internet's going to go. And their role from an advertiser perspective, which would be great, is if they could create standards across all the web pages that are accessed on their phones, so that it's easier for advertisers and content providers to access consumers.
Which is exactly what they haven't done, and which is exactly what they won't do. Because the fear they have, and I know this because I used to work at Vodafone for 8 years, the fear they have is being a bit pipe. They don't want to be a bit pipe and just carry data back and forth. LinkedIn went mobile a couple of weeks ago, and I won't say which carrier because they might be here, but one of the carriers said, well, you really, this whole WAP thing is a waste of time. What you need to do is build an application our way, the way we say it on our device. Oh, and by the way, you have to dumb down what you've created because it's got to work. The other social networks work through the same client that we want you to adhere to. So my LinkedIn member is going to have a pretty crummy experience, and we had nothing to do with it. So it's amazing. And then they called me after the main call, and they said, "Do you realize how lucky you are that you're not in the queue and we're letting you through?" And I was saying, "Oh yeah, I'm so grateful. Thanks very much." But I think for those, if you do go and buy an iPhone, here's something that you might discover: the browser's great, the screen's big, the Edge network is terrible. But when they do the next generation, when they have better bandwidth, I'm just going to go and get my web stuff via a browser. And it's open. I can go wherever I want.
That's right.
And the consumer's going to help decide.
It's pretty fascinating. One thing that I think is to Apple's tribute and just talks about openness and great products is Apple's got about a 2% share, a couple million iPhones out of the whole smartphone market. And yet recently they found out it accounts for 75% of web usage from mobile devices. Because it's the very first web browser that's actually usable. Even though it's on a slow network, it is usable and works. And it just goes to show you how once they do get into a faster network, it's gonna break wide open. Bill.
The only thing I would add as kind of advice to the carriers is that there are places where they can uniquely add value, which is not getting in front of the internet. They can uniquely add value by virtue of their network, like around location-based services and other types of tools that actually increase productivity, as opposed to trying to throttle access to what you can get on a PC. So I think if the message should be, don't get in front of between the consumer and his or her internet, but instead try to figure out ways to make that experience more valuable, and then you will actually I think do some interesting things.
I just want to get one other quick thing out. MarketWatch, when Twitter first came out and we all became obsessed with it at the office, we had somebody write to their API. So MarketWatch is on Twitter. And and I get the pings for people who are registering, and it just keeps accelerating. Like a month ago, it was 1 ping every 2 or 3 days, and now it's 3 or 4 pings a day. It's only 180 people, right? So it's an insignificant number of people, but it looks to me like maybe financial advisors are using it because they're using Twitter in their network, and what we do is we just send out our bulletins. So if the Dow crashes, we send it to Twitter, and it goes out, and it circumvents, I assume, I mean, the networks get paid because it's an SMS message, but there's no platform there for me. It's an open API. I don't have to do anything except have my journalists be right. So, that's a great example of circumventing the whole thing. And part of, like, from a monetization standpoint, I don't even really have to worry about the monetization because I send the thing to Twitter, and then I don't pay for anything, so.
Yeah, they pay and some customers pay, but people are still willing to do it. I've just a funny, you hear people say that the carriers don't want to be a dumb pipe or a bit pipe, and I heard someone once comment, I've never heard of an industry complain so much about the business they got themselves in. It's really interesting. There's a question back there.
Yeah, recently Facebook got a little bit too aggressive in trying to monetize the site, and they had to pull back from what they did. What were the lessons learned from what happened there?
Question is lessons learned from Facebook's beacon problem.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I was just at a conference that our company threw 2 days ago where Owen Van Natta from Facebook and Nick Denton from Gawker were talking about that specifically. And what he said was, and I'll just repeat it because it's from the horse's mouth, is that it's something they tried, they failed, and they moved on. So and what Nick from Gawker said is he thinks that they were over innovating more quickly than the consumer was used to, and I think, and I would agree with that statement. It's a very new space. I think you have to be very clear with consumers as to how their personal information is going to be used, and they were obviously very aggressive with it, and there was consumer backlash as well as media press backlash. So I think what you learn is that you really have to test things. I'm not saying that what they did with Beacon was the wrong thing. They tested it and they retreated. So the lesson there is that we're going to just have to keep testing and trying different formats and making sure that the trade-off to the consumer is clear, that they're getting some value for the advertising. They're giving up some of their time, just like with TV. They're getting free content, and the deal is that they have to watch some commercials. So I don't know if that kind of trade-off has been made clear to the user, to the social network user just yet.
There's one data point, I guess, similar to tracking the clicks on Twitter is I've never gotten more communications from people that I didn't know until I had people wanting me to vote down Beacon. I mean, it was amazing to me how many introductions I had to people who I had no idea were in my world, and it's very interesting for just it's a form of user-generated content and relevancy, right? And to have people just say this is something we need to rise up and be heard on was a very interesting phenomenon.
And I think it was one flashpoint in realization of the bigger issue of user privacy. And I don't know if you caught the tail end of the previous panel that someone was talking about. Just read your fine print in your credit card statement about what they're allowed to do and sell and use, and you'd be shocked if you stopped to think about it. And then the same thing's happening with behavioral targeting online, and it's interesting, AOL's now, because they own a few behavioral targeting networks, is now trying to educate users with a cute little penguin on what sites track when you visit and what they know about you, and the whole issue of opting in and opting out, I think will continue to be a big one.
Big surprise for me with that, with the Beacon thing. I think that Facebook had a great insight, which is that young people will express a tremendous amount about themselves. I mean, they've been, like you said up front, Chris, they've been doing it since they were young. And that's an insight, and I think that's a true insight. And I guess what they didn't expect was that, people's purchases being reported to their network would be that big a deal. They also did an interesting thing where you can become a fan of a company. Have you guys seen that in Facebook, where you can become a fan, you can find out who else is a fan of a particular company? But my network on Facebook is pretty big. It's all some of my friends that I've known over the years, and I don't see a lot of usage of that either. Mostly just Facebook employees who I'm connected to. So I don't know. I think that there's self-expression, but there's some line that we don't understand yet between here's what I'm doing, here's what I think, versus here's what I just bought and here's what I might buy next.
I think it's more, my personal thought is it's more of, it was a surprise. People were seeing things show up about what they did in places they didn't expect it to be. I think if they would have rolled it out as an opt-in, people would have ran to it. If it was their idea, I think they'd be glad to share it. I think it just was rolled out in the wrong way. Question, Jim, question about free versus paid and ad-supported. Been a lot of talk from your new boss about which way Wall Street Journal goes, and how do you see that trend developing?
Well, Mr. Murdoch and I were having lunch. No, I've never met Rupert Murdoch, and so I've read about it. I read about it through the Journal and other places. You know, the Wall Street Journal does a terrific job right now of monetizing its content. They have a growing audience. They have lots and lots of advertising impressions that are available for purchase. You can get all their content one click free through Google and other places. So they've figured out how to put stuff on the other side of the paid wall and keep the subscription up. So I think that when the folks from News Corp finally got down and saw the spreadsheets and looked at the numbers, it was pretty obvious that they were doing a good job and that it's a terrific model for the Journal. It's part of the Journal's identity, and so I think we're at a pretty good space right now for just executing through. I think Murdoch is going to ask everything inside of Dow Jones to go a little faster and a little harder and a little bit more aggressive, and that's fun. I certainly can feel a change around the office, but I think at this point we've pretty much settled out where we are for business model, which candidly was kind of a relief for MarketWatch. So.
Can I ask a tough question? What's the click-through rate on the ad I get before I land on MarketWatch.com?
Those are really good ads. They pay a lot of bills.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? We're getting very close to the end here. If not, I would like to thank you all for staying till the end and thank a great panel for a great session.